I'm Alan Mason and I've been connected with this club since about 1980.
Hello, my name is Ron Johnson. I'm from Rhodes originally, and I was a borough councillor at one time.
I'm John Dickey. I joined the Labour Party back in 1971. I was first elected as a councillor for Castle Ward in 1973, and I was a councillor for 30 years. I've also been a parliamentary candidate, a European candidate, and Christ knows what else. I'm now no longer a member of the Labour Party.
And I'm Tony Clark, joined the Labour Party in the mid-80s, 3 terms on Northampton Borough Council, 2 as a Labour Party councillor, 1 as an independent, 1 on the County Council as an independent, and 8 years in Parliament as the Labour Member of Parliament for Northampton South.
Hi, my name's Julie O'Byrne, and I was a regular member of the Labour Club.
And we decided it was time to demolish the walls. No one had any experience. I don't know how we ever got away with it. I don't know if planning permission was in place or what. But we just came in, sledgehammers, everything we could find. The tools were so antiquated. It's a wonder no one died. We had an RSJ delivered. It must have weighed about 3 tons. You can see it supports the gap between the 2 buildings downstairs. I remember it was a very wet Sunday morning. We started at about 7, knocking this wall down. Only we didn't realise that if we knocked all the wall down, the whole lot would have collapsed. It was only someone with slightly more experience than us who came in and said, no, we must take out a narrow area, a narrow gap, which we did, and then put the RSJ in before we took the wall out underneath. But if you'd have seen, we even had young girls, like students, 17, 18 years old. When we raised the RSJ, this is a story in itself. First of all, we got it on 2 normal pub tables, and then bit by bit, we lifted one end and we put everything under it, books, bits of wood, beer crates. We got it up to this correct height. You know, it's totally farcical. It's a Monty Python sketch, really. But we did it somehow. The late Pat Garrity was there in charge because he was great at being in charge. His brother was on one end, I was on the other. Lots of people, probably too many people, all getting in one other's way. But we raised this beam, it seemed to weigh at least 3 tons. But we raised it and we got it in situ. We hammered slates under it just to raise it that little bit to take the weight. But we done it somehow. Once it was there, we just knocked the rest of the wall out, and you'd never see that. It was just bricks, just dropping to the ground. No one knew what they were doing, really. Chucked a bucket of water on it, get the dust down, then we all stopped for a pint, and that's where the building stopped for another week, I can assure you, because it was a long pint, basically. But it was all done by volunteers. I don't remember any professionals coming in whatsoever. There's lots of members who had various skills, lots of Labour Club members, lots of trade unions. So we did have builders, we did have electricians present. They turned up, they'd done their bit. Looked nothing like it does now, but it doubled the size. The step was always a nightmare. The amount of people I see fall into their pints going down that step was unbelievable. And they literally used to just fall down and the beer would go straight in their faces. Bar was smaller then. I don't know if any of you watching this remember the bar. It was obviously much smaller. And it just developed from there. Coat of paint. There was at least 20 people painting at one time, and they had more paint on them than they had on the walls, but it all got done. It wasn't perfect, but we loved it. And we still love it. The toilets, what can you say about them?
For years, there was no Labour Club because there was a very firm hold on the Labour Party back in the early 70s and long before of the Methodist Church. And the frank argument was the Labour Party in Northampton has nothing to do with alcohol, which meant all the union branches had to meet in pubs, bars, clubs and so on. And there was a strong feeling that we had nowhere in Northampton where we could all meet together and exchange ideas. And so when the full-time agent of Northampton Labour Party, who had worked for Reggie Paget, when he died, things changed. A group of members got together and said, right, let's have a Labour club. Let's have somewhere where we can meet socially and where, of course, our meetings can take place without paying rent to external bodies. And that was, again, in the very early 1970s, principally driven by members of the Transport and General Workers Union, who were the largest contributor to Northampton Labour Party and who also needed a good meeting space. And so that's how the club started.
I mean, I came into the club probably for the first time in the mid-80s. And thankfully, those arguments about alcohol and Methodism had gone. I think for me, and it's been said 1,000 times, for me it was putting the social into socialism, because it was having somewhere you could go to debate, somewhere where you could have discourse, somewhere where outside of the political meetings you could just talk to others who were like-minded. So, they weren't all massive political debates. Some of them were, about community aspects, about things that were happening in the area. Some of them were about music, the arts. It was just a nice place to be. It was different. It wasn't a pub. It wasn't a working men's club. It was a place where the left and the centre-left could gather and talk and plan and decide how their community could be improved. For me, it was a refuge.
Virtually from its inception, I think I started coming in here about 85, 86. At that time, it was just smaller than it is now. It was just one house that they'd purchased. And so everything was in a different place.
I remember coming up the club. In those days, it really was just a bar where I'm sitting in this wonderful armchair. There was a table. I'm not sure there was a little stage.
Associated with all the other socialist clubs across the UK. So you had the Working Men's Club affiliation, but we had a socialist club affiliation as well, which meant that, when things happened, such as national things happened, such as the miners' strike, it was a good connector, because we could connect with trade union and socialist clubs across the country and organise visits, organise support for campaigns. So, the miners, of course, used the Labour Club as a base on the march, on the way down from the north through down to London. And, there were examples of people visiting and sharing ideas across not just Northamptonshire, but across the country.
We also bought beer at the beginning of the club from the Working Men's Club brewery. I forget what it was called, United?
I can't remember what it was. Yeah. It was, I know it was some very strange ales at the time. LCL Lager was the one that springs to mind. It was an awful brew. It was about 7% or something. Yeah. I don't know what LCL stands for, but we used to say that it stood for Love Comes Later, because you had to put aside any amorous thoughts or ambition, because you just usually ended up flat on your back. Yeah.
How often did you go there, and what sort of things did you go there for?
Every week. My ward met there for a start, which was Castle Ward. But also we had District Labour Party, which was the two constituency meetings there for Northampton South. And it was a good place to be. You always knew when you had nowhere else to go, you'd meet people you wanted to have a conversation with in the bar there. Many of our Chilean refugees, after 73, adopted Northampton Labour Club as their home from home, and that was always entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, apart from, the party meetings were always taking place upstairs, so, district party, constituency party, as John said. And also, when we were political in terms of being elected and was councillors, you had to have somewhere you could go after, just to discuss what had happened and to look at how you could plan for the future. So, for me, I'd probably be in there 3, sometimes 4 times a week, in terms of, sometimes only for an hour, sometimes a bit longer. But of course, at weekends, the atmosphere kind of changed. Weekends was about music and enjoyment, and Sunday dinners were fantastic. Sunday dinner time crowd, because that brought everybody from each wing of the party and each wing of the use of the Labour Club together as one, and we had some wonderful Sunday.
Well,
We also had a significant Irish community
Yeah.
who used the club, particularly at weekends, and they were usually hilarious.
Yeah. That was it was fun.
were there regular musical events?
Yes. You have to remember, way before the Lab was formed, the Labour Club was a key venue for music in Northampton and Northamptonshire. So, there's a hell of a lot of local bands would have played their first gigs in the Labour Club and would have rehearsed for the first time in the rooms upstairs. I'm talking about, we almost have resident bands. I remember Banish the Vermin, who were a very good Irish band. They were almost a resident band. I can remember the Labour Club football team taking them on tour to the Isle of Wight as part
And
of
Groovy
that.
Underwear.
Groovy Underwear was another one. A Glurk Trollin were a strange group.
Glurk Trollin.
Glurk Trollin were.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, there's a lot of local bands, not just music, but also, there was a lot of local poets. There was a lot of performing artists who saw the Labour Club as a safe place and somewhere where they could experiment, somewhere they could play, perform, but not be over criticised by the audience. We welcomed all, and there's some very, very good artists that went through the Labour Club and went on to greater things.
It's interesting you use the word safe. It was one of the few places in Northampton then where women could go on their own and feel safe.
Yeah. And that was not, it was in the Constitution, but what's more important, it was the attitude of the members. So you knew you were being looked after. Any woman would know they were safe. Anybody who, we take for granted nowadays that people from different walks of life with different sexualities, different gender identities, would feel safer, but there they could be safe, and they knew they wouldn't be discriminated against. They knew they wouldn't be harassed.
So that describes the ethos of the place, doesn't it? Is there anything else about the ethos of you mentioned earlier about the fact that it was women felt safe there, that the Constitution was written from the viewpoint of a woman. Is there anything else about the ethos that
Yes, it was one of the clubs, because there were at that time many working men's clubs in the area. But it was one that was used very much by local residents. Because first of all, they didn't feel intimidated. They didn't feel it was a male-only culture. And it was actually a very social place to be. A lot of our more active members were simply people from the streets around.
But also, it was a fantastic place for political education. A lot of people came into the club, be them locals and be them from further afield, because they knew it was the Labour Club and they wanted to know more. Sometimes they may have felt a little embarrassed about, I don't know much about socialism or the left. Where can I go? Where can I have this discussion? And I can remember some, really fantastic discussions with people who were hungry for knowledge, hungry to see if there was an alternative. We talk a lot these days about artificial intelligence and the dangers of artificial intelligence. The real danger is natural stupidity. The real danger is when people don't want to learn, don't want to look at the alternatives, and are quite happy living in this fog of misinformation and media pulp. What the Labour Club did was allow people to come in and talk about what was important to them, and to hear other people's ideas, and to say, do you know what, I don't have to conform. I don't have to do as I'm told. I don't have to take others' point of view as mine. I can have a free mind. There are other people like me who want to help and to change the world, not just to go along with it.
Well, can I ask you a bit about Labour Halls? Did you have any involvement with Northampton Labour Halls?
Yes, because I was a branch secretary when it was founded. All the branches in Northampton had a share in the committee in the running of the club. And yes, I was branch secretary at Castle Ward, and I held the share. Never used it, but we were able to. That was part of the Constitution that firmly said this is a Labour Party building.
Yeah, for me, Labour Halls was something They did get me on the committee at one stage, but it was something I desperately tried to avoid. There was enough meetings.
We noticed.
There was enough meetings as it was without having another meeting about, the running of the Labour Club. But, God bless those that did, because they kept us on the straight and narrow and made sure the Constitution was upheld and listened to complaints about members who were then banned or barred because of their actions. So it was a necessary evil, but it wasn't a committee I wanted to be on. But yes, it was. My understanding was that at the time of the club's formation, Labour Halls was the barrier between the National Labour Party and local members, because it meant that the building was then in the control of local people rather than being consumed in some national pots.
Do you know to what extent did the Northampton Labour Halls look after the building? Are you aware of any kind of how that was done? Was it by volunteers? Did we pay outside people to do things?
We had a steward, and the steward was charged as part of his job description to make sure that the building was safe. And most of that work was approved by the committee, but organised through the steward. I think when Jeff retired, this was Jeff Howes, I think when he retired, without being disparaging to anybody that followed, I think Adam, his son, took over for a while, but he couldn't do it all, and that's the time at which, before the Labour Club closed, where things started to fall apart. So it lost its fire certificate for a time. It fell into a state of disrepair, and that was not the fault of those that came after Jeff. It was more the fault that I think the committee by that time had stopped meeting. So there weren't enough volunteers, there weren't enough people to do it.
I think it's worth adding at about that time there was a dispute between Northampton South constituency and Northampton North. Without being unkind, the MP for Northampton North, Sally Keeble, didn't like the idea that the club was in the South constituency. So tension started to build up between the two constituencies. And it was that sort of negativity that actually drove people away from being active. People from the North didn't want to be on the committee because they knew they were facing criticism for doing something in the South.
And that affected usage, because I used to use the Labour Club and the rooms upstairs for all of my campaigns, be them local and or national. And it was also used by a lot of community groups for particular protests or campaigns that were more local. But I think Northampton North, with Sally's support, withdrawing from the club, deciding to hold their meetings elsewhere, deciding not to attend events, that had an impact, because obviously you'd cut out half of the potential membership who were now going elsewhere and going to different clubs, and that would have had an impact.
Can you remember any specific events that either were you remember them because they were really bad, or you remember them because they're quite funny, or anything that stick out that happened at the Labour Club that probably wouldn't have happened anywhere else?
Well, I mentioned the Irish community. I would, to people who knew the Labour Club then, I would merely have to say Tom Duvalli, and everybody would know exactly what I was talking about. Tom was one of the wittiest and cleverest men I've ever come across in my life. Tom used to sit at the end of the bar when Jeff was behind it, and the banter that went on then was people used to come in and hear it. There was one memorable occasion, and it's the only joke you'll hear from me today, was there's a party member who was boasting about his army career, and he said, "With these hands I killed a man," and Tom sat saying, "Oh, were you in the catering corps?"
Yeah.
And that story has run for years.
Well, Tom was replaced in some ways by Pat Garrity, another member of the Irish community, who took on Tom's mantle and trying to think of an anecdote, I don't know if it would be publishable, was that Pat was a GPO engineer and used to go down holes with those barriers around. And I remember him being in the club telling us that he'd been down a hole near Church Brampton, and he heard click-clop above, and a horse had been frightened by a car, and it reared up, and unfortunately the horse dropped its stomach down the hole on top of Pat. And we all looked at him, gasped because he'd just come from work. And I said, well, what did you do, Pat? He said, well, this woman was on the horse and she looked down the hole and she said, oh, my man, I'm terribly sorry. He said, and I told her, he said, it's all right, missus, I thought it was the horse. and that's the sort of banter. But it's not, might not be politically correct, but it was more than, as I say, it was more than a political club. It was somewhere where, at times, some of it was risque, others, the events were more serious. We talked about campaigns, we talked about miners' strike, we talked about local campaigns against racism, against injustices. Yeah, there's just so many. There's so many.
How do you thinking about the club and how it's changed? When was the last time you were there?
Probably together, I think. We went. Neither of us have been back much since it became the lab. And when we have been back, I guess it's been to talk to people, to try to help and assist and to give some of the history. But I think that's part of our age. We don't end up in pubs as much as we used to. I don't go out listening to live bands as much as I used to. So it's not that we've suddenly gone against the lab. I wish it every success. I think it's just that we got older. We're old comrades rather than young comrades. And but the longer it continues, the better. Particularly if it brings young people. A system helps them in terms of their performance careers. I just wish we could replicate and bring back the political education angle. I wish people would talk politics, not. I don't want it to be boring. I don't want people to say, "Oh, you're the lovely Labour Club. That's where you go to talk politics." But there needs to be an element of activity, collectivism. There needs to be somewhere where people can go and talk about how they improve their communities for the better.
I think, however, with the modern Labour Party as it is today, the idea of talking politics is something which the leadership don't want, and which everyone is very cautious about. There never used to be caution about whether we'd attack Kinnock. He even came to the club, and there's a memorable photograph of him trying to shake my hand, and I'm looking quite contemptuous. But the fact was that we were actually able to argue about ideas. I don't think today's Labour Party under Starmer is a party that wants to explore ideas, unfortunately.
I'm trying to think of his political advisor. She was elected in '97. I can't think of her name.
Who's?
Neil Kinnock's party. Remember, she came to the Labour Club and told me I'd never get elected by wearing chinos. I had a pair of cream chinos on and no tie. And she said, "Oh, you'll never get elected with chinos and no tie."
Our times have changed.
Marvellously, yeah, our times have changed. Now it's fashionable, I guess.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak and his cashmere jumpers. And
indeed, yeah.
I think it was probably earrings and the makeup.
And all the tattoos, yeah.
Yes.
So, but yeah, no, it was. I think we had a lot of visits from a lot of national figures. Some more welcome than others. I remember Tony Benn came down with me one night. He'd been performing down at Derngate, and I said, "We'll come for a drink afterwards." And we had just an impromptu discussion and speech from Tony. That was a lovely night.
Yeah.
And there's no photos.
There is a photo of that. I've got a photo of that. Yeah, on my phone. I can give you that.
Oh, cool.
During my one of my election campaigns for the parliamentary seat, because Northampton South was not considered terribly winnable, they sent me the odd personage. And the one that I had most fun with was when they sent Stephen Lewis, the actor, who played the inspector on the buses. And he came on the bus. Blakey, yeah. That was so funny. He actually parked a bus outside the Labour Club. Don't know where he got that from. And we had some wonderful photos. And there were people in the streets saying, "Oh, there's Blakey." Yeah. It's quite hilarious. I also had a government minister called Peter Archer.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
And the photographer didn't know who he was. I'm not even sure he knew who he was.
Yeah, we used to
but
get.
you got the bigger names.
Well, not really. I mean, I used to get those on the left who would come and support me because they were personal friends, and your Claire Shorts, your Diane Abbots, and and those that were of similar mind. But the party itself used to make sure that I never got to hear of anybody big coming, because they were put into Northampton North so Sally could use all of their time. And I used to end up with people that nobody knew. You know, some obscure defence minister. I can't even remember his name myself now. No, I can't. And that's the point. That, you know, we were kind of, oh yes, we'll send you a minister. It wasn't anybody had ever heard of. You know, almost tried to airbrush me out, which they did in the end after they expelled me. But that's a different story.
I think you'll find actually we as a town and a party had lots of difficulties with the regional Labour Party. After all, Northamptonshire was right outside the East Midlands. We had Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Leicestershire, and then us. And that could, I mean, they didn't really like us. In fact, we were in the wrong league. I always have been in the wrong region. We should have been in the South Midlands.
Yeah, I mean, at one time we considered changing the letterhead, so it just read Northampton South Constituency Labour Party, open brackets, suspended, close brackets, because we spent most of our history suspended from our regional party for one reason or another. Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, I mean, leaving the Labour Party was difficult because it was part of my life, but I was expelled after the party broke its own rules over local selection, and that forced me into becoming an independent. But that didn't hurt, and I won the election, and I think I was the first non-Labour councillor in Castle.
Yeah, you were.
But what really hurt about that was that I remember at the time the Labour Club got a grant from the European Union to open a local Labour Party museum in the one of the two top rooms in the club. Lots of display cabinets, lots of pictures on the walls, lots of Labour history going back to the Northampton socialist days, back, you know, way before the Labour Party was formed, the Independent Labour Party. But on the wall was lots of pictures of our 97 election campaigns, where myself, as Northampton South, Sally Keeble, Northampton North, both got elected, and of course in 2005 when we were re-elected. And I went back to the Labour Club about 4 months after being expelled. Somebody invited me up and I went upstairs to a meeting, and it was the only time I think I felt like Lenin, because I'd been airbrushed. I think Lenin was Trotsky was airbrushed Trotsky was airbrushed off the train. I was airbrushed off the Labour Club. All of the pictures of the campaigns, all of the pictures celebrating the Labour Club, anything that had my name on it, be it local posters or letters, had just vanished. I never did find a way it won. It was like, you know, Tony Clark's been expelled, let's just airbrush him out of history. You know? I think that happened a lot with people who fell out of the Labour Party. You found yourself disappeared, unfortunately.
Yes, I think that's actually true. It occurs to me that I was also expelled with Tony because was I your agent?
He was my agent.
I was his agent.
Yeah.
So fine, I accepted that. We broke the rules, we stood against the party, no problems. However, a few years later, when the Labour Party had the good sense to elect Jeremy Corbyn, I reapplied to join. And it was a bit like a very strange experience, being readmitted. A regional officer was reading the charge sheet, which he'd invented, and the regional officers, 3 members of the regional executive, decided I would not be allowed back in. I was allowed back in by the local members, and that's what I was grateful to. I believe that there is still a soul of socialism in Northampton Labour Party, but I've seen that eroded over the last few years. It's gone, and in fact yesterday I resigned from the Labour Party. This time I really resigned and I wasn't expelled. And I resigned because of the way the party has treated people like Diane Abbott. I can't be in that party. And I suspect there are many who feel like me. I think the party, the solidarity and comradeship and fun of having the Labour Club in Northampton was a place where people, any Labour Party member in the country, if they turned up in Northampton, would find their way to the Labour Club, because they knew that word Labour meant it was a Labour Party organisation. and they would come to the club, and we'd always have entertaining discussions. We'd also have people from all wings of the movement come and argue, and we never hit anybody, or nobody ever hit, well, I was there at least, and we never had any of the unpleasantness that I see abounding in the Labour Party at the moment. The treatment of long-serving MPs, the treatment of councillors up and down the country, the treatment of party members who were expelled in the most spurious of reasons. I think the party has lost that. And part of that loss is the way they've lost the Labour Club. The Labour Club was a symbol in Northampton. It isn't now. I like what it is now. It's doing a good job in the community. But that should have been the Labour Party's job. Should always have been the Labour Party's job. That building was given to the Labour movement by the Boot and Shoe Union. It should belong to the movement.
I think also, John, nobody was ever thrown out of the Labour Club for sharing different political ideas.
No.
You were thrown out because you had committed some awful act of discrimination and or bias or whatever that may be. But I think during my time, obviously the Labour Party membership was the biggest grouping. But it didn't matter if you were a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. It didn't matter if you was an anarchist. It didn't matter even if you was a Liberal Democrat. We had a
It
few
didn't
of
matter
those.
if you were a Tory.
But Tories used to come in, yeah.
But then we'd bar them.
What mattered was that it was a place where you felt safe to discuss political issues, and that was massively, massively important. And I really respect and admire people to this day that stay in the Labour Party because they believe that it can change. But unfortunately, they must be lonely. Unfortunately, there's not the people locally that they can group with, discuss with, how they're going to change matters. Because as soon as you put your head above that parapet, the regional office is going to shoot it down. And that's a real shame. It really is.
I heard about the Labour Club from a friend who said it was very child friendly. My marriage had recently broken up and I had 3 children, and I felt maybe it was somewhere I could get out and go to and be welcomed, and that was true. I was very welcomed. The club was always a very child friendly place, and still is, in fact. At the time, I would say most of the regulars, or a lot of the regulars, were quite involved with the Labour Party. We had obviously the councillors coming in for their meetings and also to socialise, but we also had a lot of social workers and teachers who tend, I think, more to support the Labour policies of that time. And they were very active in making, in putting events on, like events for children. A particular lady who was a teacher at Military Road School organised a Christmas pantomime every year for the children, and we could join in, the adults, and we put the panto on for the kids. I think that's it. I need to look at my notes now. Okay, so we had the Christmas pantomime. We would always have a Halloween party for the children as well, and the Woodcraft folk held their meetings here, which most children would join in. That was a tea time, I think, on a Friday. Other regular events in the club, we had a crib team, a disco that was once a month. So the Caribbean guys used to come in and play dominoes, which I think they've now returned, and they have a day here. We also had a women's group who were mainly gay and bisexual women who couldn't find a safe place to go. There were also women as part of that group who had been harmed by men, weren't necessarily gay, but didn't want to be in a club where they might get chatted up or might feel unsafe. So they had a disco here regularly once a month, and they had actually the room we're in now, and we put a female member of staff up here, and no men were allowed to come in, which maybe people would say it's not very PC now, but I think it was a great thing. We did have a very strong ethos in the club of no racism, no sexism and no homophobia. And Jeff Howes, who was the steward at the time, stuck to that rigidly, and you could literally get thrown out of the club if you broke any of those three rules, really. So it was a very safe space, not just for the women for up here, but for the members and children and everybody that came in the club. So I suppose we introduced a bit of diversity before it became a bit of a buzzword. As well as the things for the members, because not everyone who came in was political. I think everyone that came in supported the Labour Party, but not everyone wanted to be involved with politics. But we did become involved during the miners' strike when Jeff and some other councillors set up fundraising events. And we used to have a regular quiz in here. We started donating money from that. We had other fundraising events that he set up. And we sent money and anything else we could. We had a collection at Christmas for toys to send to the miners' families. And we received some beautiful letters thanking the club for what it was doing to help them. So I am I think everybody in here was quite proud to be part of that and to do our bit and to help out, because obviously it was a terrible time for the miners and their families. We also, and another way I think members are supported in here, we fundraised for a lady who was going to, you have to stop it, I can't remember, where was she going? So as well as the fundraising for the miners, we also got involved if any member of the club was doing some fundraising of their own, supporting any particular charity. If they wanted to hold an event to help fundraise, it would always be supported by Jeff himself and by the members of the club who would come along and dig deep to help anybody who was really trying to help someone else. It was very much a community, and is again now, with lots of new things happening here. I also worked here for a number of years. I did the cleaning, which was great. My son was little, I could bring him with me. He used to scour the floor to see if anybody had dropped any money. He usually found about 50p in 10s and 20s, and obviously I let him keep it. And that was his sweet money. Probably paid him, he used to polish the tables for me. And then I worked on bar here for quite a long time, which helped me immensely as a single parent. And later, when I went to uni, asked some extra money really to earn for that. The biggest event that I remember here was probably the 1997 election. Because the club was staying open until 3 a.m, we swapped bar staff over. So I think I did until about midnight, and then someone else took over. Had the TV on, which we'd found from somewhere and stuck up on a shelf. It was absolutely packed. Everyone had high hopes. And it was a joyous evening, of course, when we won. And I think there were some photographs, I don't know if they're still around anywhere, of people holding banners, sort of just basically celebrating, having a great time. So that's my memories of the Labour Club.